You've had a bit of practice, right? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Banachari Jamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupada Paramhamsa Parivajikacharya Asto Tadasadashi Śrīmad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Prem Se Gohosi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki, Shri Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki, Shri Purushottam Chitra ki, Shri Ganga Maya ki jai, Shri Jamuna Maya ki jai, Bhakti Devi ki jai, Tulsi Devi Maharani ki jai, Harinam Sankirtana ki jai. Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Shivaya Krishna Stabila Shmani Bhajan Papirita Namane Namo Shivaya Krishna Stabila Shmani Bhaktivedanta. Can you bring that mat over for me, please, so I can put the madanga on it? Just put it there. Very good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading from the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Canto 9. Which is entitled Liberation, Chapter 18. King Yayati regains his youth. Text number 30, well, we'll actually get to 39, but we'll start at 28. 28 to get started with. Tatetya vishtate praha devayani manogatam Petra datayato yasye sanugayatu mamanu tatetya vistate praha devayani manogatam Petra datayato yasye sanugayatu mamanu tatetya vistate praha devayani manogatam Petra datayato yasye sanugayatu mamanu tatetya vistate praha devayani manogatam Pita tatayato yasye sanugayatu mamanu tatetya vistate praha devayani manogatam Pita tatayato yasye sanugayatu mamanu tatetya vastate praha devayani manogatam Pita datayato yasye Sanugayatu mamanu. Tatetyavastate praha. Devayani manogatam. Pitra tatayato yasye. Sanugayatu mamanu. Ladies? Tata iti. When King Vrishabhava agreed to Śrīmad proposal, avastate, the situation being settled in this way, praha, said, Devayani, the daughter of Śrīmad, manogatam, her desire, Petra, by the father, Tata, given, Yutaha, to whomever, Yasye, I shall go, Sa Anuga, with her friends, Yatu, shall go, Mamanu, as my follower or servant. After hearing Śrīmad request, Vrishabhava agreed to fulfill Devayani's desire, and he awaited her words. Devayani then expressed her desire as follows: whenever I marry, by the order of my father, my friend Sharmistha must go with me as my maidservant along with her friends. Text 29. Pitra data devayanyai Shamishta shanugatada. Svanam tat sankatam bhikshya tadartasya chagoravam devayanim paryacharat stri sahasrena dasavat. Vrishabhava wisely thought that Śrīmad displeasure would bring danger and that his pleasure would bring material gain. Therefore he carried out Śrīmad order and served him like a slave. He gave his daughter Sharmistha to Devayani, and Sharmistha served Devayani like a slave, along with thousands of other women. Purport. In the beginning of these affairs, concerning Sharmistha and Devayani, we saw that Sharmistha had many friends. Now these friends became maidservants of Devayani. When a girl married a Kshatriya king, it was customary for all her girlfriends to go with her to her husband's house. For instance, when Vasudeva married Devaki, the mother of Krishna, he married all 6 of her sisters. And she also had many friends who accompanied her. A king would maintain not only his wife, but also the many friends and maidservants of his wife. Some of these maidservants would become pregnant and give birth to children. Such children were accepted as Dasiputra, the sons of the maidservants. And the king would maintain them. The female population is always greater than the male, but since a woman needs to be protected by a man, the king would maintain many girls who acted either as friends or as maidservants of the king. In the history of Krishna's household life, we find that Krishna married 16,108 wives. These were not maidservants, but direct queens. And Krishna expanded himself into 16,108 forms to maintain different establishments for each and every wife. This is not possible for ordinary men. Therefore, although the kings had to maintain many, many servants and wives, not all of them had different establishments. We're going to move on. I'll come back to this, but this is more or less storyline. Although, what can go wrong if you have more than one wife? What can go wrong? Well, we're about to find out what can go wrong in this situation, right? Let's keep reading, shall we? Nahushaya shrutam dadva saha samishtaya oshana tamaha rajan charamishtam adhastalpena kahichit. When ISKCON gave Devayani in marriage to Yayati, he had Sharmistha go with her. But he warned the king, "My dear king, never allow this girl Sharmistha to lie with you in your bed." So, as I said, what could go wrong? Well, we're about to find out. Vilokya yoshanashim rajan chamishta suprajam kvajit tameva vavre rahasi sakya patim rito sati. King Parikshit, upon seeing Devayani with a nice son, Sharmistha once approached King Yayati at the appropriate time for conception. In a secluded place, she requested the king, the husband of her friend Devayani, to enable her to have a son also. Raja putriya tito patye dharamam cha veksha dharmavit smaran chukra vacha kale tishtameva bhyapadyata. When Princess Sharmistha begged King Yayati for a son, the king was certainly aware of the principles of religion, and therefore he agreed to fulfill her desire. Although he remembered the warning of Şukracārya. I'll restate that. Although he remembered the warning of Şukracārya, he thought of this union as the desire of the Supreme, and thus he had sex with Sharmistha. Purport: King Yayati was completely aware of the duty of a Kshatriya. When a Kshatriya is approached by a woman, he cannot deny her. This is a religious principle. Consequently, when Dharmaraja Yudhisthira saw Arjuna unhappy after Arjuna returned from Dwarka, he asked whether Arjuna had refused a woman who had begged for a son. Although Maharaj Yayati remembered Şukracārya's warning, he could not refuse Sharmistha. He thought it wise to give her a son, and thus he had sexual intercourse with her after her menstrual period. This kind of lust is not against religious principles. Interesting. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, text 11, Dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi. Sex life, not contrary to the principles of religion, is sanctioned by Krishna. Because Sharmistha, the daughter of a king, had begged Yayati for a son, their combination was not lust but an act of religion. An act of religion. Interesting, huh? We will move on though. We're going to go to 39 because this is all part of the story really. Yadum cha turvasum chaiva devayane vyajayata druyam chanum chapurum cha Shamishta Vashapavani. Devayani gave birth to Yadu and Turvasu. And Sharmistha gave birth to Druyu, Anu and Puru. So they both had sons. When the prayer, let's Garba Sambhavam Asurya Bhatur Vigyaya Manini Devayani Pitur Geham Yayo Krodha Vimurchita. When the proud Devayani understood from outside sources that Sharmistha was pregnant by her husband, she was frenzied with anger. Thus she departed for her father's house. She left home. She was upset. Naturally upset. Priyamanu gata kami vacho bira pumantrayan na prasadayatam sheke pada samvahana dibi. King Yayati, who was very lusty, followed his wife, caught her, and tried to appease her by speaking pleasing words and massaging her feet. But he could not satisfy her by any means. Sukrastama hakupitaha Srikamamrita Srikamanrita Purusha Tvam Jara Vishatam Manda Virupakarani Nrinam. Śrīmad was extremely angry. You untruthful fool, lusting after women. You have done a great wrong. He said, I therefore curse you to be attacked and disfigured by old age and invalidity. And what was Yayati's response to that? Sri Yayati uvacha atriptosmi adya kamanam brahmanduhitari smate Vyatyasyatam yata kamam vayasayo bidashyati. King Yayati said, O learned worshipable Brahmana, I have not yet satisfied my lusty desires with your daughter. ISKCON then replied, you may exchange your old age with someone who will agree to transfer his youth to you. Purport. When King Yayati said that he had not yet satisfied his lusty desires with ISKCON's daughter, ISKCON saw that it was against the interest of his own daughter for Yayati to continue in old age and invalidity. For certainly, his lusty daughter would not be satisfied. Therefore, ISKCON blessed his son-in-law by saying that he could exchange his old age for someone else's youth. He indicated that if Yayati's son would exchange his youth for Yayati's old age, Yayati could continue to enjoy sex with Devayani. Iti labdha vyavastanaha putram jeshtam avochata Yado tata pratichemam jaram dehi nijam vayaha. When Yayati received this benediction from ISKCON, he requested his eldest son, my dear son Yadu, Please give me your youth in exchange for my old age and invalidity. Matamaha kritam vatsa na tripto vishayashvaham vayasabhavadiyena ramshyekati payasamaha. My dear son, I am not yet satisfied in my sexual desires, but if you are kind to me, you can take the old age given by your maternal grandfather, and I may take your youth, so that I may enjoy life for a few years more. Purport. This is the nature of lusty desires. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 7, text 20, it is said, Kamaistai ritigyanaha. When one is too attached to sense gratification, he actually loses his sense. The word ritigyana refers to one who has lost his sense. Here is an example. The father shamelessly asked his son to exchange youth for old age. Of course, the entire world is under such illusion. Therefore it is said that everyone is pramata, or exclusively mad. Nunam pramata kurute vikarma. When one becomes almost like a madman, he indulges in sex and sense gratification. Sex and sex gratification can be controlled, however, and one achieves perfection when he has no desires for sex. This is possible only when one is fully Krishna conscious. Yadavadi mama cheta Krishna padara vinde. Nava nava rasa dharman udyatam ratumasit. Tadavadi bhatta nari sangame smaryamane. Bhavati mukha vikara sushtu nishtavanam cha. Nishtivanam cha, yeah. Since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him, whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl with distaste. Sexual desire can be stopped only when one is fully Krishna conscious and not otherwise. As long as one has desires for sex, one must change his body and migrate from one body to another to enjoy sex in different species or forms. But although the forms may differ, the business of sex is the same. Therefore it is said, Puna punascharvita charvananam. Those who are very much attached to sex transmigrate from one body to another with the same business of chewing the chewed, tasting sex enjoyment as a dog, sex enjoyment as a hog, sex enjoyment as a demigod, and so on. Om Jnana Timirandasya Dhananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmaye Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kada Mahiyam Tadati Svapadantikam Mukam Karoti Vatsalam Pangum Langayate Girib Yat Kripa Tabaham Pate Sri Gurum Dinatarinam. Okay, so one of the striking features of the ninth canto, certainly that we've looked at so far, is the difference between, and we mentioned this the other day, the difference between the culture of modern, current civilization, if you like, if you could call it civilization, right? And the culture that's exhibited here, where there's a clear distinction between Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, at least. We can assume that there's also consideration of Vaishya and Shudra and lower, right? And how the expectations of the individuals in that setting are completely different to the norms of today, right? And so it's quite appropriate that when Śrīmad gives his daughter's hand in marriage to Yayati, that she's accompanied by her friends. And Prabhupada always makes this point, there are more women than men, and so within that context, within that Vedic context, we might call it, a king having more than one wife is acceptable, right? It's acceptable. It's a norm. It's a cultural norm. We're not acceptable today, broadly in most cultures. Although in India you might still find some, I'd say amongst the younger generation, not. But I've known at least one family that I've met where there were two sisters married to one man. I don't know whether it was legal or not, but it was certainly de facto, right, and acceptable. Although they didn't live together, right, by the way. So, and although it is interesting, isn't it, that it was acceptable, yet Śrīmad said to Yayati, don't have any children with Sharmistha, right? And it's not stated here why. Although the consequences of him not following that instruction might illustrate why. And what happened? What happened in this situation? What happened? Hands up if you know what happened. Can recall what happened. What happened? Zach? Well, what happened before that? Yes, she got angry. She was upset. So perhaps that's the reason why Śrīmad said, don't upset my daughter. Right? Don't upset my daughter, otherwise you'll be in trouble. And it's interesting, isn't it, to see attachment here. Attachment, because this is really this is the message, in one sense, of this pastime, if you like. Who was attached in this story? Who was attached? Śrīmad, yes, he was. Who else? Yayati. Yes, Yayati was attached to Devayani. And it's interesting because Prabhupada makes the point that Sharmistha's relationship with Yayati was not irreligious. Not irreligious according to the customs of the time and the expectations or the customs as defined by the Varnashram culture of the day. And that was, and broadly accepted within a strict Varna and ashram setting, and that's dharmic, right? Dharma, right? That Sharmistha approaching Yayati was not irreligious, right? She was under Yayati's protection. And so Sharmistha approaching Yayati was not irreligious. So it looks like, it appears, could be wrong, but it appears that Śrīmad advice was just because he didn't want to upset his daughter. Right? That's fair to it. We're speculating here because it's not stated, but we're based on what we're observing. Right? We're observing what's taking place. Right? So Śrīmad says, "You lusty fellow," and then he curses him. Right? Whereas Prabhupada said in the previous purports that actually it wasn't irreligious. And if we could assume Yayati and Sharmistha, based on the descriptions, they're very attractive. They're attractive women. And Yayati's a Kshatriya, he's a king. And so therefore, it's natural to, and Prabhupada even mentions it, there is what is called the Dasi Putra, right? They're the sons of the king, and they're maintained by the king. And it's acceptable. And it's his responsibility to do that. And a Kshatriya doing that is considered to be executing his dharma. Right? Even we see the Vidura. Was Vidura also, he was a Dasi Putra, the son of who? Who was he the son of? Vyasadeva. Is that right? Yeah. So you can see this culture was fully part of the norms of the setting that we're reading about. Now compare that with the current age, right? Is it acceptable to live with more than one woman? No. Why? Because, we witness Damayanti's response to Sharmistha's pregnancy, right? Furious. Right? She was furious. So it's interesting, isn't it? That, and Prabhupada mentions Krishna's having 16,108 palaces and being able to keep everybody happy, right? Because Krishna could appear in every palace and nobody thought that they were missing out. Right? But despite his qualifications, Yayati's qualifications, he couldn't do that. And he got in trouble by circumstance, right? But then what happened? He was cursed by Śrīmad. He couldn't pacify Damayanti. Couldn't pacify her. I used to say that my dad used to make my mum angry. I think that's what men's service is. They make their wives angry. And then in order to, and sometimes it was just, show of affection. And then my dad would give mum a hug, and then try to give her a kiss, and she'd get away from me. But it was a show of affection. Well, it didn't work. Yeah, he massaged her feet and spoke pleasing words, but she still went home to her dad and told on her husband. Right? My wife never tried that on me. I'm going to go and tell your dad on you. That wouldn't work. But what happened? Śrīmad is so attached to his daughter. So the end result is that because of his attachment, ultimately to sense gratification, then he was cursed to become an old man. Right? And then what happens? When you're an old man, what's your capacity for enjoyment? Especially for sex life. When you're an old man, what's your capacity for such things? Do you think? You're not old, so you don't know. But what do you think? When you get old, what happens? Sibya, have you read anything about this? No? Yes. Desires are the same, but the capacity goes. Youth evaporates. Right? Youth evaporates. And so, but the desires remain the same. Prabhupada tells that story of, what was it, Akbar or? Yeah. And so he takes a young Birbal, is it Birbal? Tells Akbar that, well, he demonstrates to Akbar how even at old age, even on his deathbed, right, he went with the king to visit a man who was dying with an attractive 16-year-old girl, and he said, see who he looks at. Watch him. And so when they go in to see the dying man, who does he look at? He doesn't think, oh no, the king's here. He looks at the 16-year-old girl. And so he convinces the king, yeah, when you get old, that doesn't mean that desires for sense gratification disappear. Right? What is it? Vishaya vinivartante. Niraharasya dehina. Right? For the embodied, sensual attraction still remains. Right? Very important. So, very interesting situation. You know, the message is the message is attachment to sense gratification causes our youth to disappear. Right? Youth disappears because we engage in sense gratification. But then our capacity to engage in sense gratification is diminished, but the desire remains strong. And so Prabhupada mentions in the purport that Purnacharvita charvananam that because of the desire, the strong desire for sense gratification, we have to take birth again. Right? Very, very challenging. Right? Challenging. We have to take birth again, to die, which is not much fun. Right? And then to have to be born again. Right? And endure the pain of childbirth and the loss of awareness of what happened in our previous, that we're not this body. So, the cycle of, for most, the cycle of birth and death, or death and birth, is that reawakening of desires for sense gratification and forgetfulness of our original spiritual identity, which is considered a tragedy according to the Bhagavat philosophy. Right? So Prabhupada's making the point here that Yayati is illustrating the point of here's what happens when you are too attached to sense gratification. And now he's lost his youth. So what does he do? He then goes to his son, Yadu, and says, and it's interesting, isn't it? Śrīmad recognized, and we can see why we can see his attachment to his daughter, right? Because he realizes, I've taken away Yayati's youth, but now that means my daughter won't be able to enjoy. See how attached he is to his daughter, right? And so then he gives him a benediction. He's given him a curse. He's cursed him. Now he's got to give him a benediction. Oh, oops. Oops, I made a mistake. But he doesn't want to deny the curse, right? But he gives him a benediction. If you can find somebody who will trade their youth for your old age, then you can have your youth back. Basically, because of his affection to his daughter, Damayanti, right? Devayani, yeah. So many names. Yeah, Devayani. So, and anyway, this is the next few verses are about. I don't think Yadu agrees to the proposal. Even though it's his father. And ordinarily in Vedic culture, if your father asks you to do something, you do it. But who wants to give away their youth? Huh? Who wants to give away their youth, their life, effectively? Who wants to give it away to somebody else? Oh, what's going to happen to my sense gratification? Right? So, very interesting. The predicament that Yayati finds himself in. So Prabhupada mentions in the purport that it is possible, this Vishaya Vinivartante, this attraction to sense gratification is natural for everybody. Right? And Prabhupada gives the example of Vishvamrita, who was performing, highly elevated yogi, performing his austerities, but still was distracted by Menaka. Right? Menaka on the urging of Indra, who was feeling insecure because of Vishwamita's austerities and his meditation and the Shakti that he'd accumulated because of his pious and because of his tapasya. Indra sent Menaka to distract Vishwamita, and as a consequence, Shakuntala was born, another attractive denizen of the heavens, right? So the senses are always pushing, and even for devotees, Prabhupada mentions, right? Elsewhere. This is very common. And even Prabhupada says in this purport, unless one's fully Krishna conscious, there will be urges for sense gratification. Right? But of course, you know, we have our rules and regulations, so very, very interesting. But then Prabhupada quotes this verse of Jamuna-Acharya, which he mentions also in the purport of chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, text number 60. That it is possible by Krishna consciousness to overcome this attraction, right? And so he quotes this verse of Jamuna-Acharya. And Jamuna-Acharya was a great devotee, but previously a Kshatriya king, and with more than one, many opportunities for sense gratification. But he says, now I'm experiencing the pleasure, right? Param drishtva. I'm experiencing the pleasure of Krishna consciousness whenever I think of, in this case, my past sense gratification, I spit at the thought. Huh? And Prabhupada, there's a lecture, one of the early lectures in 1966, and Prabhupada goes, you can hear put, in the microphone, put. Yeah. So, now, how is that possible? Right? How is that possible? That by Krishna consciousness we can overcome the urge for sex, which is very powerful, right? Almost indomitable. What is it? Daivihi yesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya. Right? Impossible to overcome the power of the material energy. Right? And the attraction of the senses to the objects of the senses. Right? It's just by the laws of nature, an attractive object is naturally, pulls the senses. And then, of course, the senses pull what? What do the senses pull then? What do the senses pull? Attachment, that comes a little bit later. What do the senses pull? The mind, yes, the sense within. The sense within that gathers all of the input from all of the six senses. 6? 5. How many? 5. 5 senses. Prahlad, how many senses are there? 5. Good. The mind is the 6th sense. The sense that absorbs all of the other senses. Right? You can feel it. Or look at the light and then close your eyes. What do you see? Look at the light and then close your eyes. What do you see? Light. Yeah. This is very interesting. Senses have memory. Right? Senses have memory. Like, when we were, that's why I was hitting myself. When we were kids, the teacher used to, if you got in trouble with the teacher, then they'd call you out in front of the classroom. Right? And get the blackboard ruler out. Can't do that these days, but anyway. And then the teacher would say, bend over, and then get the blackboard ruler and on the backside. And then, we're really tough. You make out, it didn't hurt. Then you go and sit down. Whoa, that hurt. So senses have got memory, right? So the mind has memory also, right? The mind, being the sense within, captures all of the experiences that we've had and then stores them, right? Stores them. And we have short-term memory and long-term memory, right? An example is when often devotees complain, I read and I read and I read, but I can't remember anything. You have that experience? You read a couple of chapters of the Bhagavad Gita and then you put the book down and you think, what was that all about? Right? But then I've experienced this. You've read something and you think, I didn't really get that. Then a couple of weeks later you're talking to somebody and they ask a question and then it all comes out. Right? Because it's all it goes in a short-term memory, but this is why sleep is a function of intelligence also, because when we rest at night, the mind and the intelligence are processing all of this stuff and storing it away. Right? But of course, when a boy meets a girl and vice versa, they're attracted to each other, right? And from that attraction comes contemplation, and then from contemplation comes the desires, right? This is explained in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, third chapter also, right? And that lust, if you like, calm, is reawakened, right? Very much. Sex life is a symptom of the mode of passion, right? And so this process takes place. But Prabhupada makes the point that if we experience a higher taste out of Krishna consciousness, and that means certainly meditating and purifying the consciousness, but also being engaged in Krishna's service, right? Which is important. We notice the Acharya, Prabhupada, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, even Bhaktivedanta Thakur discouraged this, this notion of, and even Krishna to Arjuna. Arjuna wanted to, I've had enough of all of this sense gratification, I'll go to the forest and retire. Right? Renounce. Right? Prabhupada says, no. Sometimes we get devotees devotees get this idea, we should all be chanting 64 rounds. Right? And they create 64 rounds clubs. Right? On a Kodasi, we're all going to chant 64 rounds. Right? There was a fashion, it was a fad in ISKCON. It's a fad, it pops up all the time. Right? It used to be every Ekadasi will chant 64. We'll stay up all night and we'll chant 64 rounds. And then sleep all day the next day. Right? So, I mean, it's not wrong to chant, by the way. But why Prabhupada encouraged 16 rounds, not 64? Too hard. And, you know, there was this devotee in Mayapur who was, you know, living like a Babaji, chanting 64 rounds a day and living under an upturned boat or something, you know, living very renounced way. And the devotees told Prabhupada, and Prabhupada wasn't at all impressed. He wasn't impressed. And, you know, lo and behold, a few weeks later, Prabhupada asked, where's that devotee? They said, oh, he went back to America. Stopped chanting any rounds. Went back to America and back to sense gratification. Right? So, but Prabhupada says, you know, how do we practically get rid of desires for sense enjoyment? And it's by experiencing a higher taste. And how do we get that? And Prabhupada makes the point that we get that from having some faith in the association of the devotees. Ado, Shraddha, right? We have some faith in the association of the devotees. And we get the opportunity to hear from the devotees. This is how it works. It's very simple, actually. And then by hearing from the devotees, we start Ado, Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, and in the association of devotees we hear. Right? And then what do the devotees say? What's the first thing that the devotees tell us to do? Chant Hare Krishna. Yeah. And so begins bhajana kriya. Right? Our practice, our devotional practice. Then the tough one, right? Anatta nivritti, removal of anattas. And that's by full engagement in bhakti, right? By practice, right? It's just practice. It's not inspired, enthused, spontaneous bhava, or bhava very close to spontaneous love of God, right? And it's interesting, isn't it? Even we see in the example of who? Bharat Maharaj, later Jad Bharat, right? Bharat Maharaj gave up by the dint of his yoga practice. He was able to, or his training, he was able to give up his kingdom, but still fell down because of the attraction to the deer, right? And why? Why? Why is that important, or is that story significant? Because he wasn't in the association of the devotees, right? And he neglected his puja as a result. Interesting, right? So one needs to stay in the association of the devotees, practice the sadhana, practice anatta nivritti to get to the point of steadiness and then to the point of ruchi, taste, right? And from that taste comes a shakti, attachment, right? So this is the process. Prabhupada says this is a very simple process, actually. For us, hinging on and depending on pretty much entirely staying in the association of the devotees. And in the association of the devotees, what are we going to do? What will we do? Huh? We'll hear and chant, yes. And we'll probably do our service too. Right? Live in isolation and we get a bit lazy. We can get lazy. Right? Or we start thinking, I'm advanced. I'm a senior, this is what happens, right? I'm a senior devotee now. And I tell you what to do, you don't tell me what to do. and then commit offences and do all sorts of stuff, and then lose the taste. This is why association with the devotees is so important, and it keeps us humble, because it's, how can I serve you, right? Dasosmi. So that we can keep progressing and get to the point of anatta nivritti, which can be a struggle, but work through that to the point of steadiness and ruchi, and then attachment to Krishna. And that's the stage that we see Jamuna-acharya at, right? At least at. So in the beginning, faith in the association of the devotees, faith in hearing. Why Prabhupada instituted the Bhagavatam class every day, right? Here. And be reminded continuously. Give up the bad karma and be engaged in Krishna's service, right? Very important. This was the instruction to Arjuna. Krishna's instructing Arjuna, you're not going to go to the forest and be a renunciate. You'll have to act. So now act under my direction. Right? Act under the direction of, because otherwise we'll get karma. Prabhupada makes a point, you may give $100 to a beggar, to assist the beggar, right? But then, as a result of giving $100 to a beggar, that means in your next life, you're going to have to receive, because of the compounding of that pious activity, you'll have to receive $400 in your next lifetime. Prabhupada says because of interest and compound interest, you have to take birth again to get that $400. The $100 is multiplied, right? Prabhupada gives the example, you go to the bank and you put $100 in the bank and you forget about it. But the bank doesn't forget about it. And so there comes a point when they've got to give you the money because it's your karma. Right? Same with you do something negative to somebody. You've got to come back and get that again. Right? And you'll keep on acting. We keep on acting. We can't stop acting. And so that means we're accruing reactions in the future. Right? But if we act under Krishna's direction, then have a guess what? What happens? No reactions. Yeah, akarma. Karma, vikarma, and akarma. Because this is what the Bhagavad Gita teaches. Right? Like Prabhupada mentions, the Bhagavad Gita teaches everything that you can find in every other theistic science, within any other scripture, plus more, plus things that you won't find anywhere else. That's one of them. One of the principles that you don't find in other scripture is this notion of akarma. No, so it's interesting, the devotees are acting, right? They're out on the street, selling books, whatever, but no reaction to those activities. Pious activities. Real bhajanam mukhi sakriti, Prabhupada describes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. They don't produce material reactions. Devotional service produces more devotional service, not less. So, very interesting. In this, we have faith in the association of the devotees. We hear from the devotees, chant Hare Krishna, engage in Krishna's service. And then there's that progression of Shraddha to Prema, right? Shraddha to Prema. But, and that's why, that's how we easily acquire, it's not difficult. It might require a bit of staying power, but we then get the param drishtva nivartate, that higher taste that takes us away from material engagements and keeps us thoroughly absorbed in our spiritual practice. Right? Even if it's difficult, the devotees don't mind. Right? Even if it's difficult, the devotees don't mind. If it makes Krishna happy, even if I'm unhappy, I'm happy. Right? This is the mood of the gopis, the mood of Srimati Radharani, actually. So, very interesting. We need to get that taste, and that's by the process of sadhana, effectively, sadhana bhakti, which is how we move from, from Shraddha to Prem. And in order to not be victimized by urges for sense gratification, which they'll never go away. Right? Even you get old, I'm sorry to say, sense gratification still remains top priority in the mind. Right? So what does that mean? The advice from the devotees is still relevant. Chant Hare Krishna. Still do service. And of course, the taste that comes from doing that is unbeatable. Right? That's why we keep coming back for more. Because service to Krishna, there's nothing more relishable. And this is the gift that Srila Prabhupada has actually given us. The relish of pure devotional service. Which is interesting. Prabhupada, right in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, says, the first purport, the first chapter of the first purport, Prabhupada says, one has to serve without motivation. If you want to understand the Bhagavad Gita, you have to study it in the association of a devotee. So we're studying the Bhagavad Gita with Prabhupada's purports, but the motivation has to be to serve Krishna. Then our satisfaction in Krishna consciousness is guaranteed. When we serve Krishna, I want a position, or I want sense gratification, or I want whatever it is that you want. Right? That's when the problems start. Right? That's when trouble starts. I'm advanced now, you listen to me. No. Well, yes, advancement may be that people listen to you, but that instruction has to be done with a service attitude also, and without motivation. Right? We serve others by giving them instruction, but our motivations still have to be pure. And this is a challenge for devotees. We get to a certain point and then we think, I deserve this, or it's called entitlement. Right? The only entitlement we have is be a servant. Right? That's a huge realization and a symptom of advancement, because most people come to see Krishna, and what are they doing? What do they do? When people come to the temple and they see Krishna, what are they doing? Asking for things, yes. They're asking for things. When you come to the temple, do you ask Krishna for things? Huh? No? You are asking. Most of the devotees are asking for things, right? But different. Right? Different. They're not asking, gimme, gimme, gimme. Or they might be saying, gimme, gimme, gimme. But it's, please engage me in your service. Right? Which is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. When chanted properly. Right? With just the hearing, that's the service mood. So it's very interesting. In order to reach that point of freedom from sense gratification, which can exist even in the heart of a devotee, right? And was manifest even in Bharat Maharaj's consciousness when he was serving the deer. Right? Subtly, very subtle. So, in order to get to that point where Jamuna-Acharya Maharaj, that anatta nivritti, that removal of desires for sense gratification, for position, for influence, power, those things have to go in the heart of a devotee. Right? In order to then be able to move to the next stage, which is steadiness. Ooh, ouch. Got a bit of work to do, huh? But we shouldn't be surprised. We've been loitering in a material world for a long time. Right? And so there's all that residue of stuff. Sense gratification, and basically sex. That's really what Prabhupada's saying. Punascha vitacharvananam. Chewing the chewed. Right? What is it? What's that verse? Mata? Mata? What is that verse? The beginning of the verse that's got the words punascha vitacharvananam. Mata something Krishna. Matirna Krishna. Parato Matirva, something like that. Yeah. So those who are attached to sense gratification, even if they receive good advice from the devotees, they'll still go back to sense gratification. Right? Interesting. But what are we advised to do? Even if you've got desires for sense gratification, stay in the association of devotees, and maybe some of the good advice might sink in. Right? And keep chanting. And try to chant, without that attachment, without. So that we don't have to then face the embarrassments that Yayati is teaching us. Don't do this. And we're laughing, oh, ha, ha, ha. How foolish. But then we're doing it ourselves. They're very interesting. Okay, I think we can finish here. These pastimes in the Bhagavatam, very, very interesting. Śrīmad is attached to his daughter. Yayati is attached to his wife. He's doing his duty and still he got in trouble. Yeah. Okay, Kantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhaktivedanta ki jai, Hare Krishna. You want to ask a question, Sibya? It's too late. Let's have breakfast. Oh, it's school holidays, isn't it? Anyway, let's have breakfast. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.